you better forget what it feels like to be comfortable. That first year was so uncomfortable. But I've learned that those are the times and when I grew the most is when I was vulnerable and uncomfortable.
Hello, and welcome to the Art of Emergency Nursing podcast. This is where we share stories for inspiration, entertainment, and encouragement, because we all know emergency nurses have the best stories. Now here's your host, Kevin McFarland.
Hey everybody, Kevin McFarland here from the Art of Emergency Nursing, and thank you so much for listening to the podcast. I really appreciate you being here, and I really appreciate you sharing this podcast with your friends, your peers, people you work with. Share it with everybody. I have a great episode for you today. If you are a new grad nurse, chances are you have gotten the advice to not start in the emergency department. You've gotten the advice that you need to go to the med-surg floor first, do a couple years there, quote, pay your dues, and then come back to the emergency department. Well, my guest today did not take that advice. She took the advice that she got that said, heck yeah, you can start in the emergency department as a brand new nurse. What you need is lots of love and lots of care for the first year or so. My guest today got just that by the way of a residency program. So she's going to share her information about her transition to a new grad nurse in the emergency department. You are going to love this podcast with my friend, Gina. Very cool. Well, I'm so glad to get a chance to talk to you. I'm so excited that you're doing the ER nurse thing and hopefully doing well.
I'm so excited. So well. And I attribute so much of that to you.
Oh,
and I'm just so excited to finally be able to talk. It's been way too long.
Absolutely. I'm so excited for you, and I love when new people start in the ER and then they love it. That just makes my day.
Gosh. Yes, definitely can't imagine doing anything else.
That's the coolest thing ever.
There's no way.
That's the coolest thing ever. It's nice when you find your thing.
Oh my gosh! Everybody's heard this their whole entire life. Find a job that you love and you won't work a day in your life. And I honestly can say when I wake up in the morning, I'm not I have to wake up at 5 and I have to go to work. I'm so excited.
Yeah.
I generally love to work and I love the people I work with and I love the job that I get to do.
That's so awesome to hear. I love hearing that because I feel the same way. I think to myself, okay, it's going to be a long week. I got a lot to do this week. But I'm like, right. That's cool. It's all right. I'm going to have fun doing it, and I'm going to get to do some pretty cool stuff, and that gets me excited, and that makes it easy to get up and go to work every day.
I couldn't agree more, and I almost feel guilty for the people. Well, I do feel guilty for the people who haven't found their thing yet, because it truly is life-changing to be able to do something that you love, and I feel like you really get to make a difference in people's lives in the world when you get to do things that you're passionate about. Absolutely.
And it just makes it easier. I was thinking about this on the way to work yesterday, the day before. Alex Trebek just died, and he was working till close to when he died.
Right.
He was still working every day, and he was still, and even when he was sick, even when he got cancer and he was so sick and probably felt like crap, he was still working every day going, okay, I love my job. I want to do this. I want to keep doing this. And did it until he died. And then you're like, how cool is that? Not that we all want to work till we die, but, to be able to do something that you like and that's easy to get up and go and do every day. So.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
It's amazing. It's an amazing opportunity, an amazing gift to have. So that just makes me super happy for you. So for the audience, tell them your name, who you are, what you do, and how long have you been a nurse?
All right. Well, my name is Gina. I'm a new grad nurse. Well, October was my 1-year anniversary of being a new grad. So I've been in the ER for a year now, and this is my only job that's been in the medical field. I have zero experience with anything in the medical field but doing this. And I went straight into the ER in a one of the top busiest ERs in Houston, Texas. And we're, not in the greatest area, so we get to see some pretty crazy, awesome things and deal with some very interesting people. And I honestly couldn't imagine doing anything else or being on any other unit. It truly is my passion, and I feel so incredibly lucky that I get to do this every day.
How exciting is that?
I think so.
It's super exciting. It's super exciting to be able to find your thing and get a chance to do it. Because now, one of the things that I want to talk to you about, and we hear this all the time, and people have said this all the time, they say that the ER is not a place for a new grad. So you came in with no medical experience, no background.
Right. No.
How was that transition for you? Was it hard? Is it tough? Is it impossible? Tell me what your thoughts are at that.
Well, let's back up just one little step, because I will mention that this is a second career for me. I'm a mom of 4 kids, and I haven't worked in 10 years. Like when I graduated high school, I joined the Army, and I was a military police officer for a few years, and then decided I didn't like being a police officer, even though I loved the military. Got out and sold real estate. And then when I met my husband, he was Coast Guard, couldn't stay away from those uniforms. And I know, right? We've moved all over the country. He just retired in October, like when I started. The month he retired is when I started my career. Wow. And so we've lived all over the country. And I feel like, no, I don't have any medical experience. And I had been out of the workforce for so long. But being older and relocating a lot of times, I'm a good people person. I'm really good at reading people. I'm really good at relating to people. And so even though I don't have the medical experience, I do have the people experience. And that served me so well.
I bet.
Yeah, definitely. And I will say that, no, being in the ER as a new grad is not for everybody. But those ones that know that it is for them, you're not going to tell them anything different. They're going to do it. And,
True.
They're going to be the ones that you're going to look back in 6 months, a year, 5 years after you hired them and be like, wow, what a contribution they've made, what a great nurse they are. Because I feel like that personality type they're definitely go-getters. You can tell no all you want, but they're going to find a way to get around it, do what they want, in the sense of you're not going to stop me from accomplishing this. Because in my heart, I knew that there was no way that there is any other type of nursing that I would be completely satisfied. And let's be honest, I'm 40 years old and I was done and tired of settling. I was ready to start my career and put everything into it. And I'm so thankful that I was able to get into a nurse residency program at the hospital I did.
That was going to be my next question, was whether or not you were part of a nurse residency.
Oh my gosh, yes.
What do you think were the advantages of being in a nurse residency?
Everything, really, honestly. When I hear stories of, I love to know people's nursing stories. So I always ask, okay, how long have you been here? Is this where you started? I just like to see everybody's journey of how they ended up on the unit that they're on. The people that I've talked to and they're like, oh my gosh, we had 3 weeks or 8 weeks or 12 weeks. Coming from somebody who's pretty intelligent, I would have died. I really would have. With the nurse residency program, we're Vizient certified, or accreditation, I guess would be the proper word for that. And there's things I loved about it and things that definitely could be left out, but the support and, they don't expect you to be swimming marathons on day one. You get built up to that spot. And just the educational support and the foundation and then also being in a group with like-minded people that are going through the same thing, even though they might not be on the same unit as you are, you're all going through the same phase together. And I feel like it's a really invaluable support system on a confidence level, on an educational level, clinical, like everything. I truly could not imagine doing, especially ER or like ICU, a specialty, and not doing a nurse residency program.
Yeah.
I don't know how you would really be all that successful. And you could, but it probably would take longer, I think.
Yeah. It's certainly is definitely an advantage for new nurses who get a chance to be part of a residency where they get that support, because the hardest part is that first year of ER nursing, when you're learning not only to be an ER nurse, but learning to be a nurse.
Right. No, definitely. And you forget how basic the very, prime example. I had a kid, I call him a kid. They're all kids to me because I'm older. Who, he just started his nurse residency program, and my educator was like, hey, you're going to have so-and-so today. And I looked at him like, what? He was like, because in the NRP program, nurse residency program, you can't orientate like anybody. You have to have a certain, special classes and all this stuff. And he's like, I just want him to follow you, to listen to how you talk to patients and your, patient education and that kind of stuff. Like, don't ask him to do anything. Just have him follow you so he can see how you talk to patients. And I was like, okay, easy enough. But you forget, so I was showing him like the Glasgow coma scale and like the pain thing. I was like, all right, we're going to discharge this patient. And when we do that, and he also was a tech in our ER. So he'd been around for a couple years, but now he's switching gears and something completely different. And I'm like, so I know that he's going to be up for discharge soon. So I'm going to like jump ahead because we can't discharge him until I get a full set of vitals. And that includes the, Glasgow coma scale, pain, and a whole set of vitals. And to go through like the pain scale, I kind of like let him do that part, but you forget, like, if you've never done it and you're used to doing a different job, like it can be pretty intimidating. And those charting systems are not exactly the user friendly, but it just made me realize like, oh my gosh, like I forgot how basic it starts,
Absolutely. And you don't realize how much you've come along when you look back and you're like going, oh yeah, I already kind of know all this stuff, but there's still more to learn. But look how far along you are.
Kevin, there's so much to learn. I just don't know how anybody ever learns it all. I mean, of course, the basic knowledge, but it's ever changing, which is one of the things I love about medicine so much. But there's so much to learn.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the cool things about, and I always tell people that getting your RN is just a license to learn, because you're going to be learning for the rest of your career. And when you stop learning, maybe that's time to maybe hang up your stethoscope and go do something different.
I couldn't agree more. I really could not agree more with that statement. You're so right.
So that's, I think, one of the exciting things about being a nurse is just all the education opportunities you have every day with every single patient. Every single encounter has the possibility to teach you something.
No, and it really does. And if you take the opportunity to look at it that way, you will learn so much every single day. There really is something to learn every day.
Absolutely. Now, with your residency program, at first do you guys do a didactic portion? Was there a didactic portion that you get first? And tell me a little bit about that. What was that like?
Ours is like a really integrated program. So like the main foundation of it is like an evidence-based project. So you're kind of assigned like these groups of 3 to 4 people, and you'll pick a topic and you come up with an evidence-based, it could be quality improvement. It could be, one year it was like a psych green cart where, they would call code green, and there's a green cart and it has the restraints. It has all the things you would need, the security bag for the belongings, the purple scrubs, like all of those. So like some great projects have come out of these nurse residency programs. And I think with fresh eyes, we're all excited and ready to, change the world, I guess.
Yeah.
So they lay the foundation of that in the beginning that, hey, this is going to be coming up, but you don't do that for a couple months. It's more of orientation to being a nurse and the company itself, and a lot of kind of team building exercises, education. And then because ER is so specialized, we had these amazing, and I emphasize amazing ENA courses that, were like neurological crisis, respiratory, gastro, like they were all broken down into, there's probably 25 or more courses, but not all of them were mandatory for us. And then we would go to, a location, and there wasn't that many ER. There was probably like 15 of us compared to 75 in the whole cohort. And we would go and have these ENA courses and then special education for, like sexual assault and stop the bleed. We got certified to be instructors for that. And just all kinds of really great things that help you be a better nurse in the ER.
That's awesome.
And then, oh my gosh, it was so good, Kevin. I'm telling you, those ENA courses, because that was my biggest thing I felt like in the beginning was, I know how to do an assessment, but when someone comes in and it's abdominal pain or it's chest pain or it's this, like I always was like, okay, well, what do I need to be documenting? What do I need to be really focusing on for my focus assessment? So I feel like those courses were really great for that because, it's kind of, we're a teaching hospital. So, in July, you see the new residents coming in. And like my goal is to get in there always before the doctor, but like definitely before the resident. Because I want to have my assessment done so I can get the heck out of there when the resident goes in. Because if it's July, they're going to be in there for about 45 minutes. What color was your poop? What shape was it? What vitamins are you taking? Oh, okay. Just the craziest questions where you're like, okay, it's relevant, but not right now. Like this person is bad bleeding out. Okay. It doesn't matter what her poop looked like this morning. Okay.
You're like, it's okay. Nobody cares.
Exactly. So I just felt like those courses were awesome. And then to be in a group with people that are from different campuses, and just to see like how they're feeling, what they're going through too. It just felt great because at my hospital, I was the only one that was ER. So I was kind of like going through it alone. And I'm not going to lie, those first couple months were excruciatingly lonely. So lonely because, you don't know anybody. You don't even know how to, sign into your computer, let alone give certain medications. It's pretty scary without the right support. And it's not for the faint of heart. I will say that. You're going to grow some tough skin.
Yeah.
And you're going to cry. And that's okay. That's okay.
It's certainly I think that the amount of stress in the first couple months of the residence is just incredible. Like the amount of stress they go under and just learning everything and trying to figure out and how to be safe and be helpful and do the right thing and make sure you're doing right by your patients. It's just amazing.
I mean, there's just so many things coming in all directions of the learning curve, and it's really lonely. So I encourage you guys out there, be kind to those new grads. And when they're trying to open the nourishment room and they fumbled with the password a couple times, or they're driving the stretcher around the corner and they almost knock you over, they're not doing it on purpose. They're just trying to like put one foot in front of the other until, you fake it till you make it. And it's pretty powerful what a smile and a compliment can do to somebody, especially when they're going through something like that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So tell me a little bit about your preceptor.
Oh my gosh. My preceptor was hands down, like I feel so incredibly lucky that I got her in so many different ways. Shout out to Ellie. I don't know if she listens to the podcast, but I'm telling her she's going to have to. Funny story too. A lot of people don't know, but I met you in Houston at a ENA conference, or it was like a class actually, because my professors, like we had this assignment that we had to pick a professional organization, and we had to go to a meeting and write a paper on it. So of course, I wanted to be an ER nurse, so that's where I was going to go. And I met you, and it was a business meeting, so it's not like it was super exciting. But you and Kelsey and so many others were just so passionate about ER nursing and ENA and students that I was like, I'll forever be changed. Like, it was so comforting. Like, it just felt like home. And, you know, I kept coming back to the meetings, and every time I did, I learned so much. You know, like, we had different reps and different things, and I just encourage anybody who's not part of the ENA that's or whatever, you know, specialty you're in, please join the organization because it is invaluable.
Absolutely.
So from there, you guys had this like cool topics conference, and I had gotten kind of a unique, because with the nurse residency programs, they hire so far in advance. So I got hired. The interview was the day I found out I passed the NCLEX, so I was already on cloud 9. But it was like the beginning of June, and I didn't get a start till October.
Oh, that's tough.
Oh, it was so brutal. But like hindsight now, like the calm before the storm, I should definitely enjoyed it more. But it was brutal, I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, I'm sure.
So I went to this ENA conference, and I sat like in the middle front, and I'm sitting next to this lady, and we had a little break, and she was like, oh, like, you know, we started talking, and I told her that, you know, I just got hired at, you know, such and such hospital, and I was going to start in October. And she's like, oh my gosh. She's like, Ellie, who was sitting on the other side of her, has, you know, that's where she works. So we talked a little bit, and she ended up being my preceptor.
How cool is that?
Yeah, how crazy. I mean, Houston's not small, so it was pretty incredible when I walked in and they're like, oh, this is, you know, going to be your preceptor. And Ellie has been a nurse for, gosh, probably 30 years, I think. And most of it has been ER. So she knows a lot about everything. She probably knows a little about everything, but a lot about ER nursing.
Yeah.
And the most kind, compassionate, very detail-oriented preceptor that I could ever ask for. She never made me feel like a question was stupid, or that, you know, if I didn't do something just quite right, she would have a way of correcting me in a way that the patient would never even know that, you know, what I said was wrong, or I probably shouldn't have done this, or She was just awesome, and she knows everybody. So that was awesome that, you know, she introduced me to everybody. And even though like I said, I was really lonely in the beginning, it was nice that at least everybody knew who I was.
That's kind of cool.
It is.
A big part of the preceptor role is just doing that socialization and just introducing you to people and taking you around and trying to make you feel comfortable. Like, that's such a big part of it.
Huge part of it. I couldn't agree more, because I feel like, I will say, like, as far as all the nurses, she was awesome about introducing me to all of that, but not so much the doctors in the beginning. And because I am older, like, they all thought that I was a nurse before. And I was like, hey,
I'll assume you're an experienced nurse.
I'm a new grad. They're like, wait, what? You know, so the socialization, though, just introducing everybody, like, I couldn't have gotten luckier. She's such an incredible person and an incredible nurse.
That's cool. That's really cool.
Yeah.
Did you have any preceptors, or did you have any, like, you know, one of the things I hear from residents all the time is that sometimes when their preceptor is not there and they get put with a different preceptor, sometimes maybe not as good of an experience. Do you have any not so great experiences?
No, I feel like I got really lucky, because with the NRP, you have to have certain qualifications to be able to be a preceptor.
Good.
So I feel like it's pretty vetted in that way. And you know, moving all over the country, I do feel like I relate to, you know, I could relate to somebody from Washington and someone from Mississippi, and they wouldn't, you know, even know the difference as far as, you know. So I feel like I can kind of relate to people easy, and it makes it, you know, things aren't so uncomfortable because I can make things not feel uncomfortable,
Yeah.
if that makes sense. But I will say, as incredible as Ellie is, she's not necessarily like in the trauma or sick med areas as frequent, just because, you're nonstop. My Apple Watch tells me I did like 15 miles on the days that I, work in those areas and I believe every step of it. And so I was put with 2 other people during you do a short stint in trauma and sick med right before your off orientation, just to get more exposure to those really high acuity patients.
Yeah.
And they were just equally incredible in their own different ways. And I really I tell it's funny, the educator at my hospital's name is Kevin, same as, you and what you do. And he is so good at pairing people together and bridging the gap on things that are a disconnect.
That's
and
cool.
I think that it's so cool because him and I were having a conversation not long ago about, when somebody doesn't do something right or they rub you the wrong way, and, the right way to have a conversation. And I was like, when you're not vibing with that other person or things are uncomfortable, that clouds clinical judgment. You should be able to be like, dude, that was real fucked up. And then not be mad, because we all can be better. We all can grow together. And I feel like it's really intriguing to watch how different people who you would not even imagine working together can work so well together because they have good communication.
Yeah. Absolutely. And it's all about the communication. So your best preceptors, your best leaders in the department are all going to be your people who can communicate well and let folks, know what they need and how they need it and how they want it done and all that kind of stuff. And if you can do that successfully, that's a great thing to be able to pass on to the next group of nurses coming through. Definitely.
Because you can be the smartest, you can be the hardest working, all of these, you have the best intentions, but if you can't communicate effectively, there's a lot of room for misinterpretation, and that clouds clinical judgment. So I think that communication is huge.
Is there anything that if you could have added anything to your preceptorship or your start in the ER, your first year, what would you add?
Probably, I really enjoyed the ENA courses, and I wish that maybe they were broken up more, so it wasn't all pretty heavy material for 2 weeks, that it was scattered throughout, and that not all the modules were mandatory, but that they would make it mandatory, because I feel like they were so good, but I didn't always have the time to do all of them. And that's my biggest regret. I wish I would have been able to do all those modules. And I wish that there would be more, when you first start, there's all of these, we call them pills, education, little video things that you have to watch and read. And then you have to take a quiz at the end. And it's pages. It's so many pages. I'm sure you guys have something like this too.
Absolutely.
And, everyone was like, oh, just take the quiz. Take the quiz. You're fine. And I'm like,
just jump to the end.
But
You'll be fine.
I've been a nurse for 10 years. I have to know this stuff. And it's funny now because, my year is up. So all my regulatory courses had to redo. And, I went straight to the quiz this time. But I was like, you guys, I have to know this stuff. I can't just so I feel like I didn't have enough time for some of that really important stuff that I was feeling so pressured to kind of just move through it and then get back on the floor instead of having designated time of hey, today you're just doing this. And I think with COVID, it sounds like the other cohorts really aren't having that problem because they're doing so much from Zoom and a lot of virtual days from home and doing that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Which is so crazy that everything has changed the way it is.
Yeah,
the world is nothing like it was a year ago,
Yeah, so much has changed that you're Yeah. And I think it's going to change forever. Like, we're not going to get this
Agreed.
digital cat back in the bag. Like,
No.
people have realized that people can work effectively from home and get stuff done. And people are realizing that you can do effective clinical education via distance. And like, that's something we're never going to get back. Like,
Right.
that's always going to be a thing. So,
Yeah, but tell me it's not a catch-22 because a new grad that had to do TNCC, which I was lucky because Life Flight did have some courses and we got to go there and do it, but like half of the hands-on stuff, like we didn't get to do that you normally would until like the code at the end. And I was like, all I wanted was like, the simple things like Ambu Bag and the OG, like all these things are so simple and we've gone over them 1,000 times in our head. But until you actually go and do it yourself, like you don't realize, like prime example, I had a code a couple months ago and my job was, put them on the life pack and get ready to, the mucus and all that stuff. Well, I get them on the life pack and I'm like, what the heck? Like, why is the rhythm not showing? Kevin, I didn't hit the lead button. But when it's your first time and it's a code, like I attached the pads. Like, what do you mean it's not just showing up on the life pack,
Yeah. And that's like one of those simple things that like no one would remember to tell you unless you were actually doing it.
No, because it's so basic. Like we were talking pain scale, GCS, like just so basic that you forget, like, oh yeah, you got to hit the lead button. But to a new grad, especially in a code, when there's 20 buttons on it, you're like, wait, what?
Yep. That you're absolutely right. And it's one of those things that like that just in time or just right there education stuff that like, and that's kind of stuff you can get to some degree with your preceptor, but like it's if you remember to do all that stuff.
Right. Exactly.
So yeah, no, I think that makes it those kinds of things that you're like, oh yeah, we never did tell you about that, did we?
Yeah.
So.
No. You did not tell me about the lead button. You did not. And now the doctor's yelling at me because why is the rhythm not on the screen,
Yep. Yeah. Oh, no, for sure. So, how funny.
I didn't think so. I felt so stupid. It was so embarrassing. Because they're like, yes, I'm finally in trauma and like I know what to do and something so simple like that. And you're like, oh.
And it's one of those, like someone comes over, just touches it and goes, beep, done, fixed.
Yes.
There you go. And you're like going, oh.
Yes.
Yeah,
that was
no,
me.
for sure. Like, you're like, oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah, there is that. You got to do that button first. So, how funny. Very cool. Well, I'm glad. It sounds like it's been a pretty exciting first year.
Oh, man, it really has. But here's another thing of bringing you back to you don't know until you do it, is at my facility, you've had to be there for at least a year. And sometimes a little sooner, but normally at least a year. And then you do your trauma rotation. And your trauma rotation is a month long, and that's where you are every shift for a month.
Wow.
And it's pretty intense, but it also is pretty incredible to see where you start and where you end up in just a month's time because you're always reinforcing those things. I mean, I think I did a chest tube every single day for like a whole week, 1 week.
Wow, that's cool.
Okay, yeah, I know exactly where the chest tubes are, all the things I need for it, all of this stuff and how to set it up and, have the doctors stuff that they're going to want before they even ask it is pretty awesome feeling. And it was my very first real bad gunshot wound. It was a guy, he had a couple wounds and, there was like 3 in the chest, a couple in the abdomen, a couple in the legs.
Wow. And
it was my very first shift in my trauma rotation. And so I walk in, I'm like, I don't know what to do. All I know is like, okay, I'm just going to put, some 16 gauges in this guy. Go get my line in. And I'm like, you guys, I need more tape because the tape's not sticking. And I went through all the tape on my thing and the the girl that I was with, she kind of just laughed and she's like, Gina, you got to co-ban it. And I was like, oh, well, shit, that makes so much sense. I mean, because the guy is so freaking sweaty because he's bleeding out and shot. But until you're in those situations, you don't realize those small things that are actually really big. Where like, oh yeah, you need to co-ban that IV in because there's no tape in the world that's going to make it stick.
Yeah, not when he's that chalky.
No, definitely not. It was pretty awesome though. It was, cool. And then when they went to put the chest tube in, she was like, hey, back up real quick. Because I was handing the doctor the chest tube. And so I back up, and sure enough, the whole ground is just covered in blood. And I just got new shoes. So I was super appreciative.
You're like, oh, thanks. Yeah. You just saved my shoes.
Yeah. I was like, oh, thanks. I really like these shoes.
That's awesome. How cool is that?
It was awesome though. And he made it. So that makes it even better.
Yeah, that's very cool. Exciting. I'm so excited for you. I'm so excited to hear that this first year has gone really well.
I just feel so lucky. Like somebody pinched me, because the people I work with are so incredible, and you know, they know I ask a million questions, but they don't make me feel dumb asking questions. And a couple of them are like, Gina, if you didn't ask me, I would be worried. So I feel like I work in such a supportive environment that I feel guilty, and because I know that it's not that way for everybody, but I just encourage the ones who feel like they're not in that environment to just keep asking the questions, keep being positive, and you might be the change in that department, because people want that. They want to be happy. They want to get along with their coworkers, and you can change the environment. It takes time, but you can change it.
It does take time. It takes time to change an environment, and it takes, you know, what they tell most leaders, that it takes 3 to 5 years to change culture in a department. And, you know, if you think about, depending on what you're doing, that could feel like a really long time. But in the long run, you know, 3 to 5 years goes by pretty quick.
It really does. Like this year was the fastest, longest year of my life.
I bet it was. I bet you were like, holy cow.
Yeah, it's just crazy how fast it went by, but so long at the same time, if that even makes sense.
Yeah. What advice would you give new grads or about to grads, advice who want to go into the emergency department?
If that's where your passion is, then do it. No one, like I'm telling you, you know, I had my ADN, and I was a little bit older, second career in a market that has incredible nursing schools. And pretty much everybody was like, oh, you're going to have to do med surg. Oh, you're going to have to do this or that. And my school is pretty incredible in the fact that, you know, pre-COVID, I don't know how it is now, we got to do clinicals in probably like 6 or 7 different hospital systems and facilities.
That's awesome.
So I got to see, it was so awesome because you got to see a lot of stuff, and just, you know, things you like, things you didn't like. And somehow it's like the black cloud of, it works in goodness and bad, where it's like really good or really bad. My third and last semester, I was in a hospital where I was between the ER and the ICU. And I love both of them, but I'm like, shiny, the ER is for me. And so I got to do 2 semesters at this facility, and I made a lot of, you know, connections. I always treated it like it was a job interview. Like I always smiled. I worked hard, asked, you know,
you have to.
I wasn't like, oh, I got to go do my care plan, and would disappear for 3 hours. You know, like I was the one that ended up having to take it home and do it, because I wasn't going to miss anything that was going on if I was going to be able to do something.
Yeah.
And I was lucky enough to score an interview. And in today's world, I mean, that's pretty exciting in itself, because it's competitive out there.
Yep.
So competitive. And I'll never forget it. Definitely won't. So I had my interview. And Kevin, when I tell you it was perfect, it was probably the best interview I've ever had. Like, I answered all the questions, how I thought was like, oh, that was really good. I don't know where you pulled that from, but wow. Um, and like one of the employees had like text me and he was like, oh, they loved you. I think you're going to get it. And I didn't get it. I was so embarrassed and so devastated because I had to show back up, and I was in the ICU at this point doing my capstone, and I had to keep like showing up, and everybody knew I didn't get it. And I was so devastated. I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do? Like, if I didn't get this, and I've been working here for, 6 months at this point, granted, I only did probably whole 7 shifts, but enough that they knew who I was.
Yeah.
I was so devastated. And I feel that's about when I met you guys at ENA, and that changed that, where I was like, you know what? I'm not going to let anybody tell me no. Like, I don't care how many interviews, how many applications. And that's what I did. Like, you connected me with some awesome people for resume help, and I probably watched every YouTube video there possibly was on, interview questions and scenarios. And I totally skipped like the 4th semester, which mostly was all review, the way our program was, thankfully, and just really focused on building connections. And I don't know, I feel like when you meet me, I'm a pretty genuine person. And I just somehow, when the next go around for applications came open, I was going to apply again because I knew that I could get a job on the med surg floor there. Like I had the manager like called me and she was like, oh, I got your name for so-and-so, like, apply this go around for the residency, because being a new grad, you have to do the residency. There's no way around it.
Yeah.
So I was so torn because I was like, you know what, screw this. I'm going to apply to the hospital that's the opposite direction of this one, that's a lot bigger and a lot busier. And you know what? Go big or go home. And I got an interview. And I got the job.
That's awesome.
So, I will not take away from those few months of how low you feel when you want something so bad. But network, get out there. I went and did ACLS on my own. I did the NIH course thing on my own, just so I could show initiative. Like, hey, I'm willing to do what it takes. Just give me a chance. That's all I'm asking, is for somebody to give me a chance.
That's awesome.
And thank God they gave me a chance.
How exciting is that? That is so cool.
I think so. I mean,
what an
awesome
opportunity
to do this. But it's people like you and Kelsey and ENA and like that collaboration of support. It's priceless.
Yeah, it really is. And it's an important piece. And I think that so many people are kind of dedicated to truly try to help those they can help. And nothing's more encouraging than seeing success stories like you go out there and just crush it and, learn to be an ER nurse and getting used to that. And holy cow. And you're going to be doing this for a while, and you're going to be precepting the next group of students.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. And not only, I'm not saying to join it and do this to make connections to get the job, because you really are going to learn so much. Like, we had orthoblast. It was like a rep came to the hospital to show us like some splinting, but I had gone to an orthoblast like ENA thing, and the rep there was so awesome. He had all these rap songs for the splint types and to remember to like the pad the ends and all this stuff. And I was like, man, you really missed out. We should have called that other guy. I learned so much from him. And just building those relationships too. I mean, I just want to say, though, I only had my ADN, and everyone's like, oh, you have to have your BSN. You have to have your BSN. And you know what? You do, because I had a lot of no's, a lot of job fairs, a lot of no's. And no isn't always no. And I definitely enrolled in a BSN program. I'm almost done now. But don't let anybody tell you can't do something if you really want to do it. You'll get there. Don't give up.
I love hearing that. That's great advice for new nurses coming through.
Well, I just want them to know that it doesn't happen every day, but it happens.
Absolutely. How exciting.
And I did have to wait. I mean, gosh, I graduated in May, passed my NCLEX in June, and I didn't get to start working till October. So
that had to be hard. That's a long time. That's a long time with not doing much.
Well, I started doing
doing
my
stuff,
BSN,
but
so that, took time. And two, I got 4 kids, so it was like over the summer. So it was perfect. I had to spend one last summer with the kids because I was a stay-at-home mom for 10 years before this. So it was kind of like bittersweet.
Yeah, I bet. I bet you're like, okay, now I got to go to work.
Yeah, no, not anymore. Now I'm like, I need to go to work because this homeschooling is not for me. Thank God they're back in school. I couldn't do it anymore. I would have probably lost a kidney and a liver because it was rough.
Yep, that's tough. But boy, what a cool thing to be able to do something you really wanted to do. So, well, I really appreciate you. I really appreciate you getting on the podcast and sharing that with folks, because I think people need to hear that, like, this can happen. You can do this.
Right.
So I have a lot of students that listen, so that's going to be an important message for them to hear.
I can remember sitting there and being that and just so desperately wanting somebody to give me a chance.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I can't thank you enough for doing this with me. This is going to be really helpful for some folks and encouraging. So that's the goal.
So. We need more positivity out there.
Absolutely. So the last question I always ask everybody, and I'm going to ask you too. What are 3 things a brand new ER nurse should remember, and what's 3 things they can just forget?
Ooh. Well, I guess one is you better forget what it feels like to be comfortable, because it is so uncomfortable doing stuff you don't know. But being uncomfortable, you get to grow. Being vulnerable, asking the questions. I mean, you have to learn and grow. It's a process. But it's really uncomfortable to be vulnerable and be like, hey, I don't know. Can you walk me through this? Can you even just be right there by my side and watch what's going on? That first year was so uncomfortable. But I've learned that those are the times and when I grow the most is when I was vulnerable and uncomfortable. So forget being comfortable.
Okay.
And then this one's for my nursing students. Those effing care plans. Forget them. Forget them. You're not going to do them. While it helps you prioritize care and kind of anticipate things, thank you, God, you do not have to write care plans.
Yeah. It's a blessing to not have to do that. That's a skill you'll be able to download. If you're going to the ED, it's a skill you'll be able to download pretty quick.
Yeah, definitely. Third thing I would forget. Probably just the whole, you need to do med surg for 2 years. You know what? If you have the opportunity and you know what you want to do and you have a passion for that specific field or specialty, go for it. Go for it. You don't have to do med surg for 2 years. I'm telling you, I would have probably, thank God for the med surg nurses out there. I love you. But I love it being different all day long. I love it. I love turning and burning my rooms and impacting those patients and walking out the door. I love it. I couldn't do it. So thank you for doing it. Tell me it's not true.
It's totally true. Totally true. And what are 3 things they should remember?
Smile. Always smile. You have the power to change people's lives with just a smile. When I started, like I've alluded to a few times, like I was so lonely. Even though my preceptor was like so inclusive and introduced me to people, like I just still was lonely. And I remember a piece of advice that I'd given to me a long time ago, and I still find so true, especially moving all of these we lived in 5 states in 7 years, so we moved a lot. And I always smiled, and I said hi to, Mr. Charles in the cafeteria, to Jason that stocks the rooms, to Blanca who cleans the room. Like, all of these people, I would just smile and I would say hi. And to begin with, I had no idea what their name was. But as time went on, I started learning their names. And to this day, I'll walk through the halls and someone will say hi to me, and I'll be like, shoot, what was their name? I know where they work, but because I say hi to everybody and I genuinely mean it, I can't tell you how awesome it feels to be walking around the hospital and somebody from another apartment's like, hey, Gina, how are you? And the nurse I'm with that's been there for 5 years is like, who the hell is that? It's really good.
You're like,
for them and you.
Yeah, that's
I'm telling
awesome.
Try it. It's awesome. I would also say, don't forget, please remember how important patient teaching and education is. Because I find that what I thought the ER was going to be, it's like that 5% of the time. The rest of it is, oh, I stubbed my toe. Oh, I have a stomach ache. Or my favorite is, the girl who comes in, the itching and burning, and you ask them, okay, do you pee after you have sex? Do you this, that? And they look at you like you have 5 heads. And I'm, for all things itchy and smelly, please go urinate after you have sex. It's just small things that, we think everybody should know. Or the blood pressure medicine with the, 60-year-old that came in a couple weeks ago, and she was sitting up, and I was like, oh, wait, we're going to sit here and we're going to just dangle for a second, wait for your blood pressure to, regulate so you're not dizzy when you stand up. And she looked at me like I was crazy. And I was like, what? And she was like, is that why they told me when I picked this up that it might make me dizzy? And I was like, well, yeah. She's like, why didn't anyone explain it to me like that? I wouldn't be here with 5 stitches in my head if they would have told me that, oh, this is what's going to happen and why you're going to be dizzy. I think we get so busy that we don't educate our patients when they're leaving a lot of times on the small things that are really big and the reason why we have our job.
Yeah. That's
and,
cool.
Yeah. And it makes you feel good when they're like, oh, wow, I didn't know that. Makes you feel kind of smart,
Yep.
And I would say lastly that you're your patient's advocate. If something's not right, or you just have that gut feeling, or they weren't treated fairly, or they might, just be their advocate. You're there for them. If you notice that they're not making eye contact and the other person in the room is answering all the questions, have them step out and talk to that patient. If you're in CT and neurology and the residents are talking and you're like, shoot, are they going to TPA this patient or not? We don't need to wait for this stuff. Hey guys, are we going to TPA or not? You're their advocate. That's what you're there for, and advocate for them.
Absolutely. I think that's one of the most important roles of a nurse, is that you're advocating for your patients. Because I think to myself, sometimes without good nursing, it would be so hard to navigate the healthcare system.
Oh my gosh,
how would you even know? How would you even know what to do? How would people know what to do or when to do it, and go in and translate what the doctor said after the doctor said it? All those things that nurses do, that's so, so critical.
It's so critical. And don't doubt yourself. I mean, especially being a new grad, I'm like, oh, I got this dialysis patient that's having sickle cell crisis. His glucose is 43, but his potassium is 7.0. And the doctors put all these orders. He's an amp of dextrose. It was 7 units of insulin, the bicarb calcium. And I was like, man, if I give him 7 units of insulin IV with just 1 amp and his glucose is 43, I don't know about this.
Yeah.
And so I go and ask him, and he was like, oh, shoot, I'm so sorry, you're right, and put in another amp. But what if I wouldn't have just asked to clarify? Yep. Don't doubt those, just because they're the doctor and you're the nurse, or you're new or whatever, ask somebody to make sure. Don't doubt those gut feelings, because I'm such a firm believer in that. Like, those instincts really are a real thing. And follow them, listen to them.
What great advice.
Well, thanks. I do have one other thing I will say. I have this story about a patient who I'd been a nurse not that long. It was probably only 3 weeks. And it was a homeless guy. He came in and he just smelled so uremic. Just you could smell the urine. And he was homeless, and his complaint was urinary incontinence for 4 or 5 months. And my preceptor was like, oh, he'll probably just be a UA and a sandwich. So I didn't, and he was not English speaking, which we have like the rolling iPad translating is so easy. And I used it, just basic, asked, and, he was very calm, meek. And so I literally, gave him the thing to give a urine sample. I didn't put him on the monitors, like nothing. I completely just disregarded the fact, anything else. I was like, he just wants a warm bed and a sandwich, and that's it. Well, I finally get orders to do blood work and all of that. His blood work comes back, and his hemoglobin was 3.2, and his potassium was 6.9. And I was like, oh my gosh. I hook him up to the monitor, like huge T waves, like all of this stuff. The guy had such an enlarged prostate that he had put himself practically into kidney failure because he wasn't able to urinate. And he was so, so sick. Like, we transfused a couple units of blood. He ended up being in the ICU for like a month. And to this day, I don't care what their complaint is. Like, I always put them on the monitor because, it's really easy to take them off. But you can't ever go back and get that time. If I would have put them on the monitor and saw those T waves to begin with, like, I would have been like, oh, what's going on here, and investigated more,
Absolutely. It's one of those things that the last thing you want to do, you always want to err on the side of the patient,
Yeah, no, definitely. Because some people just don't know how sick they really are. They don't normally come to the ER, but then we get the ones that come for everything, But you just got to treat each patient like you've never seen them before, and that what they're coming in for is a big deal.
Absolutely.
I don't want to be caught with my pants down again. So they all go on the monitor until proven differently.
That's pretty good advice. Pretty good advice. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this with me.
It was a pleasure. It's been too long. I can't wait for things to semi-get normal so I could come to some meetings and we can get caught up.
Thanks for listening to the Art of Emergency Nursing podcast. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast and follow us on Facebook.